What we're looking at today is the fairly new Auddict, that's Auddict, Master Solo Woodwinds. This is the Auddict Master Solo Woodwinds Clarinet. Auddict at this very time, which is the 21st of January 2017, are running a 50% off sale on these instruments. So if you want one, go and pick them up. They're half price. Otherwise, they'll be up at their usual retail price of around £80, so around €80 or equivalent in dollars. So this is the MSW Solo Clarinet, Master Solo Woodwinds Solo Clarinet. They are claiming that this is revolutionary in the way that it handles legatos, and I was intrigued to see if it was, so I got this one to have a little look at. It is very similar, the GUI is very similar to the Auddict Master Brass library that I've reviewed elsewhere, and I had a few queries on that one which have not yet been resolved, and I have a similar number of queries with the Master Solo Woodwinds. So I'm going to run through them. I'm going to run through them and just show the different articulations, the different microphone positions, and the controls on this interface. And then just give you a play and show what it sounds like. So it's a solo clarinet. It's a multi-sampled, multi-dynamic solo clarinet with the standard CC1 controlling dynamics. And my first little problem I've got with this is we wouldn't know it, but I'm actually wiggling the controller for dynamics. You can see I'm wiggling it because there is MIDI information coming into contact, but there's nowhere on the screen to know where I am in my dynamic range without looking at my computer keyboard in front of me, and my synthesizer keyboard, and seeing where the slider is. So that's one thing I think they really do need to add to this, is some kind of feedback to show where you are in the dynamic range. But having said that, it does respond at all levels of dynamics. So my pedal is fully down. I'm going to play a note, and as I push my pedal up, it brings in the harder dynamics. I don't know how many dynamic layers there are in this. It may only be 2 with the pianissimo. And then going into the mezzo forte. But it does work. You get some quite nice dynamics, and you can play a solo line. And get some dynamics in there. So that was the principal legato with no vibrato. They don't seem to have a legato with vibrato, and there is no way of adding vibrato to this. You'll see down the bottom of the screen there is a little knob that says vibrato depth and another little knob that says vibrato intensity. I would agree that this is the depth of something and the intensity of something else, but it is not vibrato. So if I turn the intensity up somewhere and then increase this depth and play a note, it's much more of a tremolo effect than a true vibrato effect. And you'd have a hard time convincing anybody that was actually a real clarinet doing that sound. So although vibrato depth and vibrato intensity are included in the GUI, I would be honest, I would not use those because they would just make the instrument sound incredibly strange. So for the purpose of this, I'm just going to delete them. They've got this other controller down here called key volume, and if I turn this right up and play some notes, and now in pianissimo, you could probably hear some little clicks and pops there. They are not me hitting my controller keyboard. They are the keys on the clarinet making a sound. You can actually go to the key noises themselves by choosing this articulation. And you can hear the key noises happening there. So they're actually quite nice. With the legato and you're playing something nice and quiet, you can actually hear those little key noises coming in. So And that's actually really quite pleasant. So I do like that. Well done for doing that. That's brilliant. And that's a legato with no vibrato. What they claim that the legato can do is incredibly fast arpeggios and runs without any kind of weirdness happening. And I'd say they've done a very good job at doing this. If I can just play a really kind of fast arpeggio at fairly high dynamics, and again, I can't show you where I am in the dynamic range because I can't actually tell you where I am. I'm kind of about 2/3 of the way up. So if I do a little arpeggio, just a G minor arpeggio, as fast as I can play with my right hand, and that sounds horrible with the key noises. Let's turn them down and turn up the dynamics a bit more. This is what I mean by not knowing where you are in the dynamics. I thought I was somewhere quite high, and I'm clearly not high enough. So let's do that again. Now that's not bad at all. It's actually a really nice legato, and you can get away with a lot of fast playing. So if I just quickly do a little scale in G as well. You can get away with some runs as well. So I can see this being actually quite handy for doing those really fast little arpeggios in the middle of pieces, and maybe some runs and things like that, where you can buy run libraries, of course. There's lots of instruments that will have pre-recorded runs, but it's always been the way with me that pre-recorded runs never quite go from where to where I want them to go, so it's nice to be able to play them in. So that's the legato, and I'd say they get the legato phrasing quite well done. It's just disappointing the dynamic range isn't really that dynamic. It's a little bit on-off when it comes to the tone, but they get away with that, and I think it's quite nice. They've then got a polyphonic with no vibrato, so no vibrato again, but now you can play polyphonic chords, and there's no legato scripting here at all. So there's a polyphonic solo clarinet, which is quite nice. Again, the dynamics are just on that little cusp of switching from... And I'm only moving my controller by a few millimeters. There's quite a harsh switch there, but if you can cope with that, I think it's quite doable. Now, this is clever. They've taken some lessons from other library manufacturers, namely the Berlin libraries, who do this quite clever trill scripting. Normally with trills, you either get major or minor trills. That's what you're stuck with. You play a G and you play a major trill, and it just goes G, A, G, A, G, A, G, A, and play a minor trill, and it goes G, G sharp, G, G sharp, or G, G, A flat, etc. And that's very nice, and you can control them with your dynamics, so you can do nice little swells and things like that. Well, what these guys have done is put a script in, so if you play one note, trust me, I'm playing one note, nothing happens. If you play one note and very quickly afterwards play a second note, so I'm going to play G and then A, it'll trill between those two notes. Now if I play G and C, G and D, G and E, G and E it can't cope with, G and F can't cope with, and G and G it can't cope with. So it'll go up to a sixth quite admirably. Sorry, it goes up to a fifth. And let's go from a F to a C. So that, I think, is really clever. So you can just select your interval and off it goes and does a trill. And of course, it's not just doing semitone and tonal trills, it'll do quite nice up to fifths, which is actually quite a good distance to be able to do a trill. So it becomes quite a useful little tool. However, that tool is only as useful as the dynamics allow you to make it. And I don't know if you noticed that, but all of those trills are hard dynamics. I can move my dynamic controller CC1 anywhere I like during that phrase and nothing changes. So even if I start the phrase fully pulled back with CC1 on 1, it's maximum dynamics. On 128, 127, its maximum dynamics. So although we've got trill control and we've got this clever trill scripting, we can't use it to kind of fade in and fade out our trills. We can't use it dynamically. But nevertheless, it's a clever function and it may well be useful. Beyond that, we've got this side over here. This really is the less interesting side. It's got a flutter. Again, the flutter doesn't respond to any dynamics. You can control the volume, of course, but that wouldn't do the same thing. And I like it. It's nice, but it's never going to get used. You've then got triple tongue. So there's a polyphonic triple tongue, which has a nice sustain at the end of it. So you could use that to end a piece, for instance. However, again, the triple tongue doesn't respond to any dynamic control using CC1, so you're stuck with fairly loud triple tonguing. I've also noticed there are some notes that don't agree with the same timing as other notes, so if you do happen to play a chord, for instance, with a note that isn't quite in time, it sounds a little bit strange, but then that's natural playing, so maybe that's been left in there. And then we've got some shorts. Key notes I've already shown you, and they are essentially a short articulation, but we've got staccato and staccatissimo. Staccato is kind of a staccato. It's a little bit long for a staccato. If I just play one note. They're velocity controlled and they tend to have quite a long sustain that tends to tail off over time, so kind of the release is quite a long one, which makes playing it all becomes a bit messy if you start playing a little bit too fast with the staccato articulation. The staccatissimo articulation, however, is actually a much better one, so let's just go back to some little arpeggios again. So fast playing notes like that sound really nice on the staccatissimo, and it's a very dynamically responsive staccato sound if I play very quietly. So I like the staccatissimo, and I can see that being used quite a lot as well. These, I'm clicking on the screen, you can see with my cursor, these are controllable using the key switches. If I can find out where the key switches are, they're somewhere down, here we are, they're somewhere down the bottom there, and they are controlled. Interestingly, legato is on C sharp for some reason. Polyphonic no legato is on E flat, trills on E. The C and the D down the bottom do nothing, and then you've got flutter on the F, triple tongue on the F sharp, staccato on the G, staccatissimo on the G sharp, and the key noises on the A. So why on earth they've chosen legato to be on C sharp rather than the standard bottom C, I don't know, but it's what they've chosen to do, so we'll leave it like that. They have this release time function, which allows you to pull the release trails down a little bit. So for instance, in this legato passage, you may find that note sustains on a little bit too long, so you dial down the release time and it releases a bit quicker. So that's quite a nice way of playing faster passages without too much problem. As I said, the key volume controls the clickiness of the keys, which is quite nice. We'll ignore the vibrato depth and intensity. And then finally, you've got this selection of microphones. You've got 2 spots, 3 spots, looks like a dynamic and condensers, and then a ribbon microphone. I haven't read the manual for this, so I can't say exactly what microphones they are, but you can mix and match the spots, and by clicking on the blue dots you load or purge the sample sets. You've then got a close pair, stereo, you've got a stage and a room position. So you could just turn all of these down, for instance, and I won't go in great detail, but the close pair, for instance, sounds quite nice. It's quite a close sound. Turn the synthesized reverb off, and then you've got that's the close mic, very, very dry. Put the stage mic on. We've then got a little bit of ambience, and then add the room mic, take away the stage mic. None of them really give you, let's turn the release time up. None of them give you a big, thick, lush reverb, so actually it's quite a nice, dry instrument to do solo lines with. But like all the other Auddict software, they've given you this reverb. It's a synthesized kind of contact-based reverb, and you can add some nice lush reverb onto that. So as a solo clarinet goes, they've gone some of the way. I'll be honest with you, this cost me £39 plus VAT, so it works just over £40. It's actually, for that, it's very good value. I'm not trying to knock it. It's got a few weird things about it, but for the money, it gives you a very good clarinet, which you can use in context, in orchestral context, or even get away with it as a solo instrument in some kind of close harmony work. So I'm not knocking it at all. I think it's a very, very clever instrument. They got their legato scripting very well done. The trills are very clever. I'm hoping that maybe they'll update it in time and add a few more functions to it. They do seem to update their instruments from time to time. And I wish they would add real vibrato rather than this weird algorithm LFO type stuff. But that's the Master Solo Woodwinds Clarinet.